Hello, and welcome to So It's a Show. It's a podcast where we attempt to keep up with Lorelai and Rory's pop culture references on Gilmore Girls. I'm Kyla.
And I'm Taylor.
And today we're talking about the Waltons. A
Yay.
lovely family.
A lovely family that made the Great Depression look idyllic.
I wish I could have lived in that time.
So much fun.
Better
having
days.
to worry about paying $2.35 for a pair of pants.
Or a taxi ride all the way from town.
Ooh. Look at it's taking me back to a time I never lived in.
And I don't want to live in, but somehow I kind of do.
Yes. That is one of the things my mother told me about watching the Waltons growing up, is it made the Depression look great. And she would say, like, why can't we have a depression? Which it was the 70s, so they kind of did, just not to that scale.
They had a depression in the 70s?
Well, the economy was not great.
Oh.
Yes. She
All
also
the hippies.
tells stories about remembering waiting in line for gas at the gas station in the 70s and running out of gas while waiting to get it.
Well, I remember people parking in line, waiting in line for gas when it would go cheap. Maybe when we were in like junior high. I remember my parents like just driving somewhere because they heard it was going to have cheaper gas on the news.
Whoa.
Maybe that was like Iraq War time.
Yeah. I do remember being shocked about when gas went over $1 per gallon.
Yeah.
After 9/11. It's
It
like
seems...
one of my earlier memories.
You're early about
My early
gas price.
my first half of life memories. So, and now we pay gas that is $2.35 a gallon, and that's a pretty good price.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 30s, that was the price of John Boy's nice gray flannel pants in the episode I watched of the Waltons.
Lucky boy got some flannel pants.
Oh, we'll get into that.
Oh, I'm excited. So, we were talking about the Waltons, and it is because Rory referenced this show. So, here it is.
And it's so hard to believe that at exactly this time, many moons ago, I was lying in exactly the same position.
Oh boy, here we go.
Only I had a huge fat stomach and big fat ankles, and I was swearing like a sailor.
On leave.
On leave, right. And there I was.
In labor.
And while some have called it the most meaningful experience of your life, to me, it was something more akin to doing the splits on a crate of dynamite.
I wonder if the Waltons ever did this.
And I was screaming and swearing and being surrounded as I was by 100 prominent doctors. I just assumed there was an actual use for the cup of ice chips they gave me.
There wasn't.
But pelting the nurses sure was fun.
I love you, Mom.
Shh, we're getting to the part where he sees your head. So there I was.
I do like that episode or Lorelai relaying her childbirth experience to Rory.
This is one of my favorite early episodes. Rory is such a cute little baby, and they're getting to, it's a classic Emily Lorelai showdown.
I don't remember what happened in the rest of that episode. What was going on?
So, this is Rory's 2 birthday parties. So, Emily throws Rory a really nice party in the style of Emily Gilmore. But she invites all of the kids from Chilton without telling Rory, not realizing that Rory doesn't like those kids. But then, so then Emily and Lorelai get in a fight because Emily doesn't like how Rory behaved, and Lorelai's trying to stick up for her, and Emily, of course, blames it on Lorelai. And then they have a second birthday party at Lorelai and Rory's house with all the Stars Hollow crew, and Emily and Richard come. And at the end, Emily realizes she doesn't really know her granddaughter at all, or her daughter. And then Lorelai, right after Emily says that, sees Rory sneaking out back with Dean getting a bracelet for her birthday. So, when Dean was precious.
Yeah, before he got stupid.
That's a great way to describe it. Because they really dumb him down as the series goes.
Do you think so?
Yeah, I mean, like,
I guess you're
in the
right.
beginning, they become friends and start, like, their sweet, innocent flirting over books. And then he kind of loses all interest in books and school.
Yeah, that is true. I forgot he used to talk about books with her that she was reading, and then suddenly he just wanted to watch Lord of the Rings, which is a good movie. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not like
true.
a dumb movie. It wasn't like he was asking to see Fast and the Furious 22.
Yes, 22. Or, although maybe you could interpret it as Dean was just finding an interest in books to try and connect with the girl he liked, and then the truth came out, which
That's
is the
true.
more internally consistent, but maybe not as realistic explanation.
I like it, though. I would stick with it.
Okay, let's go with that. Dean
All right.
was just putting up a front because he liked Rory.
But the Waltons, remember them?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even remember her saying that.
Mm-mm.
So
it's like a blink and you'll miss it.
Yeah, it's one that didn't stick out to me. So I thought nothing when I heard it.
I knew what the Waltons was because my grandma loved it so much, and she talks about it, and she's been saying for years, she's like, that was a great show. It is one of the best shows ever made. There is always a good lesson to it.
That's what TV is for. Lessons.
Yes. And yes, so that I knew what the Waltons was because of that, but I thought I had watched it because she had talked about it so much. But after actually watching an episode with her last week, I'm not sure that I had seen it before.
So she just talked about it enough that it was like you knew some of the stories, maybe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or maybe I did a long, long time ago, but I did not remember anything.
Well, tell me a little bit about the Waltons, Taylor.
So The Waltons was an American TV show that ran from 1971 to 1981, and they had 213 episodes total, so a pretty long-running show. For context, they went 9 seasons with 213 episodes, and Friends, which is a show that is a little more contemporary and a lot of people still watch, that had 236 episodes and 10 seasons, so pretty close.
Yeah.
I was checking out its IMDb page, and I counted 13 Emmy wins for the Waltons, including Best Drama in 1973.
Drama, really?
Yes. I say melodrama a lot on this show, but yeah, it's a little, a little sappy drama, but it is. And there were 26 additional nominations for the show. And 24 million people tuned in to watch the finale in 1981, which is a pretty big number. So the show was not really expected to be a big hit. They put it on not thinking it was going to do much, but it actually ended up resonating with a lot of conservative TV viewers who were tired of inappropriate stuff on TV, like my grandma. So that is part of the reason why it was such a big hit. And according to an article from 1993 on Entertainment Weekly, they were talking about the legacy of the Waltons. And they were saying that because this was a hit, it proved that there was a TV audience for family programming and paved the way for shows like Little House on the Prairie or The Cosby Show. So it was a good sign for that kind of programming. So in the beginning it was pretty popular, but toward the end things started taking a little bit of a downturn. This is one thing my grandma mentioned. The main child actor, which we'll get into some of the plot more, but John Boy, his actor Richard Thomas, left before the show ended, and so they replaced him with another actor. And my grandma, she brought that up while we were watching, and she was like, they replaced him and it was never the same.
That is odd. How late into the series was that?
I think it was 1977, I want to say.
Oh, so they went on for several more years.
Yeah. Well, and the grandpa character passed away in 1978, so he was gone. And then my grandma mentioned this too. She remembered that the grandma character, the actress, had a stroke. So she could tell, like, I think my grandma said you could tell that she was not in great physical health after that. And then the mom, who I think the actress, you say her name, Michael Learned, she left the show full time in 1979 because the schedule was just so busy. And there are also reports that the studio didn't really treat them well. Like they kind of took them for granted and had a really busy schedule and didn't give them much appreciation. So that's a bummer.
Yeah.
Especially since it was such a big hit for them.
And it was such a family-friendly show, and yet behind the scenes,
yeah,
not as much.
And then they had a reunion on the Today Show in 2011, and Michael Learned, who played Ma, she said, in the beginning it was not too sugary, but toward the end it fell a little in love with itself. So in the beginning they were talking about some more serious stuff like book burning in Germany or the Dust Bowl, segregation. And then they kind of got a little schmaltzier, I think. So, let's see. Yeah, Richard Thomas left in 1978.
Okay.
So, that's who played John Boy.
You think they'd just make him, I don't know, like move or meet someone or, you know?
Well, and they actually had 2 TV reunion movies in 1993 and 1995 called, respectively, A Walton Thanksgiving and A Walton Wedding. Ooh. And the Walton Wedding was about John Boy getting married. But that's a pretty, long time after. That was 1995, and the show ended in 1981. So I'm not sure if they were pretending that time hadn't passed.
Yeah.
Or what.
I said unlike Gilmore Girls that moved ahead 10 years, and yet plot, like we discussed in our other episode, didn't really move ahead.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Gilmore Girls.
Uh-huh.
Hold up. I was watching the show with my grandma, and I thought, this town looks a lot like Stars Hollow. And it is.
Oh my goodness.
So they filmed on the Warner Brothers backlot. So they used a lot of the same sets as Gilmore Girls. And the Waltons' house where a lot of the action takes place. And at the end of most episodes, they'd end with everyone saying goodnight. Like, good night, Mary Ellen. Good night, John Boy. That is the Dragonfly Inn.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh, I'm trying to picture it. Yeah.
Well, okay, so I found this one site. You might call them Waltons fans. It's called allaboutthewaltons.com. And they have pictures of how the Waltons use the set next to more modern ones and how other people have used the sets. Mm-hmm. And so when they're side by side, you can totally see it. Like, oh, that totally is the Dragonfly Inn. And so the Stars Hollow downtown area is also where they filmed, pretended it was Charlottesville. Mm-hmm. And then the school where the Waltons went to children is the church in that downtown area. So, yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yes, the church is that where Lane gets married?
Yeah.
And where Suki's kids are baptized. So, yeah.
It's a small world or a small lot. I don't know.
Well, I have been to the WB backlot. Oh. I went there last year, and it's pretty big, but it's really funny because to bring it back to Friends, actually, there are so many different shows on different networks that have filmed there. So do you remember the episode of Friends with the prom video, and they go back in time and Rachel's date ditches her, and then Ross is at the top of the stairs about to take her, but her date shows up? Mm-hmm. Those stairs are in Lane Kim's house.
Huh.
So those are the same stairs that Lane walks up when she's in trouble or when she's bursting up to her room.
Yep.
So.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah. So I wonder if Gilmore Girls did this on purpose, that they reference shows that were filmed on their same lot.
Yeah, I don't know if they did that on purpose, but that is a cool connection for sure. Mm-hmm. I'd like to think that they did it on purpose.
Yeah, they do a lot of things on purpose, we're finding out as we go along.
So that's a little bit about the Waltons.
Interesting.
Yeah. So what episode did you watch, Kyla?
I watched season 2, episode 20, so it still had the original John Boy, and it was called The Fulfillment. Isn't that nice? You just know something's going to be made anew. And in my episode that I watched with, which you were mentioning your Nana, by the way, we watched episodes with our grandmothers, who I call my grandmother Nana. That's what she has always gone by.
And I call mine Grana. That's what she's always been to me.
Grana? Where does that come from?
I think she made it up. She wanted her own thing. So she's Grana.
Your Grana's got some spunk.
Oh, that is true. When she actually had an accident over Christmas and fell and kind of hit her head, so her memory was not great. She's doing great now, which is awesome. But in retrospect, one of the funny thing is she was still sassy, even when she could not remember who we are. So now she's like back to her old self, which is great. Like, but at the time, she still had her personality. So yes, spunky.
That's cool. And my Nana's 90. So to me, that kind of feels like a big milestone, like 90 years old.
Definitely.
And so I really appreciate, like, she totally still has her mind and, still have, like, the same relationship, even though it's harder to get around. But anyways, love my Nana.
Yeah, I love my Grana.
Your Grana. So I watched it with my Nana, and in this episode, the Walton family, and there's how many kids in the Walton family? 7?
Okay, we were trying to get that straight because even my Grana couldn't remember. And so we were counting on the back of the DVD case. I think 8.
Okay.
I think. But I wouldn't bet my life on it.
Yeah, I was going to say like 7. It was a big number. So 8 kids, we'll go with that. And then mom and dad and grandparents, which are they the mom's parents?
I don't know. They didn't talk about that in this show.
I guess
or in the episode that we watched.
I guess I got that feeling because I saw her interacting with them in the episode. So, anyways, and the grandparents all living together in apparently the Dragonfly Inn. So very spacious. They all had their own room. No, that wasn't the case. They were living there, and sometimes, which I don't know if this actually happened in other episodes of the Waltons, which they do that. Shows do that all the time, and I hate this, where they act like the one episode features some event, some tradition, some joke that they say, oh yeah, this has been around forever. We always do this. And so they pretend like it's always been there when it isn't. So in this episode of the Waltons, it's in the beginning, the narrator says, sometimes mom and dad would bring a child from the local orphanage to just spend some time with our family. And I was thinking, okay, but I don't know that you actually always do that. It's just in this episode you are. And I remember like in How I Met Your Mother, one episode they said, Lily, you're always bad. You can never catch anything. And she's like, what? And then they show fake, supposed other times when she dropped things. But then it never happens again in the rest of the series. And that frustrates me. It needs to be consistent. Like at least in Gilmore Girls, they have the same festivals. They don't always show them every year, which I get, but you sometimes just see them in the background. And I appreciate that.
I think Gilmore Girls is way better with that kind of continuity than a lot of other shows.
And maybe it's because the traditions that they keep are traditions of the town, and the town plays such a big part of the show. So it's just more important for them. Mm-hmm.
Well, and the town's going to stay there. So it's not like it's connected with a certain person that might move. Like, if they had some sort of tradition with Christopher, like, he's not there all the time. Whereas they live in the town. So even if Babette or Taylor or Maury were going to leave, like, the town will still be there.
Yeah, that's true. So in this episode, though, an orphan comes, and of course, when he first arrives, he is shy, and he is untrusting, and doesn't want to do anything, but it's really funny, the little boy, they always say, hey, do you want to come play with us? We're going to play ball. I don't wanna. Do you want to come down for dinner? I don't wanna. He just keeps on saying that, and it's kind of cute, but eventually he warms up to the family, especially a couple of family friends. There's a blacksmith whom John Boy works for, helps him out. And John Boy, he looked to be about 16, maybe?
Yeah, 16, 17, something like that.
Yeah. So he helps this blacksmith out. And did he appear in your episode?
Yes. Oh, not the blacksmith, but John Boy did.
Okay, well, I was wondering if the blacksmith, if he was a reoccurring character. Because, again, like, is he actually part of the show? Does John Boy always work for him, or just for this couple of weeks?
Yeah. I don't know. Because in my episode, John Boy was, I mean, he was the main driver of the action. But to get to your recurring theme, the main character he was interacting with, the whole episode, my grandma kept saying, I do not remember her. Where is she? And then she died at the end of the episode, spoiler alert. So I think she was one and done.
Yeah, so maybe that was how most of the series went. But John Boy takes little, I think his name is Steve-O. All these like John Boy, Steve-O.
Jim Bob.
Yeah, Jim Bob names. Takes Steve-O with him to the blacksmith. And they just fell in love with each other. A little boy lit up around him, and we find out that the blacksmith's wife cannot bear children. Mm-hmm. So immediately you're like, oh, orphan child, family who cannot have kids on their own. I wonder what's going to happen. And sure enough, after the woman finally comes to terms with the fact that it's very unlikely that she will conceive, they adopt the boy last minute as they're about to take him back to the orphanage, and it's all very happy.
Oh.
So it was a sweet little episode, and I will be honest, I did get a little teary-eyed.
Aww.
And not necessarily because I connected with the show so much, but just, I mean, there's something about someone finding a home, right? It was just very heartwarming. Mm-hmm. So it got to me. So good job, the Waltons.
No judgment. I will not share all the embarrassing TV shows and movies I have cried at, because I am a crier.
I am too. I'm a crier, especially with movies that are a part of a series.
Because you've developed relationships with the characters?
Yep. Yep. So Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. Oh my.
There have been shows like when I was really into Lost, when characters would die. It's like, you think about it, you've invested years of your life into these characters, caring about them, even though they're not real. But then they're gone. So when we get Richard gone in the year in life, it hurts. Even though, like, Edward Herman, I didn't know him personally.
Yeah. And that's, that just shows that we're watching quality media if we're getting that into it,
Boom.
We've connected.
Yes.
Because we have good taste.
Yeah. We have great taste.
And we want to go with you now to the home to talk about your coming back to live with us, to be adopted by us. We want you to be our son.
Instead of a baby?
Instead of anyone or anything.
So my Nana thought that it was pretty accurate. What I did is we talked at commercial breaks, because I thought maybe talking about the whole episode at the end would have been difficult to remember everything that happened. So we talked during commercial breaks, which was fun. She would just think of a new story to share about that time. So my Nana, like I said, is 90. She was born in 1926, which is the same year that the Queen was born. And she likes telling people about that. A little connection there. And what she thought was accurate was the multi-generational family living together in one home. When she was young, she was an only child, so she lived with her parents in what she called a fancy apartment in Chicago because it overlooked the water, the Lake Michigan.
Oh, that's probably prime real estate.
Yeah, and so later, after they moved in, there was another apartment building built, so it blocked a little bit of their view, but she remembers the beautiful view. And living there, 2-bedroom, so she had her own room and her parents had one. When the Great Depression hit, her mom went to a realtor and said, "Give me the cheapest apartment you got." And the realtor said, "Okay, I have one, but I don't think you're going to like it."
Well, he said, "I do have this apartment, but you probably won't like it because it overlooks the cemetery." She said, "They won't bother me. I won't bother them."
I like that.
So they took that apartment, and her father's parents moved in with them, as well as an uncle and another more distant relative. So there were 7 of them in a 2-bedroom apartment.
Whoa.
Yeah, so
Whoa.
her parents had a bedroom where she would then put a cot and sleep in there with them. Her grandparents took the other bedroom, and her uncle and the other relative shared a bed that I think pulled out from the wall. What are those beds called?
Wall beds? Murphy bed.
Yeah,
That's
Murphy
it.
bed. So I got the impression it was a Murphy bed of some sort, and that was where they lived during the winter.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had a family home that her mom inherited from her aunt or her mother, I'm not sure, a house on the lake where my Nana lives to this day. And then they could all go there during the summer, which was a larger house. It used to be a fishing lodge, and they had some farming out there that everyone would help with during the summer. But during the Depression, they were living together in that one apartment, so that resonated with her right away. She noticed that, said that was accurate. Oh, but one funny thing she did say about that graveyard apartment was that there were 2 crystal chandeliers in it.
Whoa.
How random is that? Like, it's as cheap as they could get, but it still has 2 crystal chandeliers.
You'd think they could have taken those down and sold them, but I guess if they're renting, they can't really do that.
Yeah, I did think that too. But that was something that stuck out to me in some of the stories that she told me about how people still tried to cling to some things that were fancy or considered proper. That's the word. Some things that they just thought were proper. So, for example, kids still Nana said that she was still expected to, look nice for school. And she talked about some friends who had an oil paper tablecloth. So you didn't have to wash it in the wash. It would you would lift it up and any liquid on there would move around. And they kind of played a game about putting some water on this oil tablecloth, and you had to hold it up or the water would spill onto your lap. And I asked her why they had an oil paper tablecloth, and she said because it was cheaper than a normal tablecloth. And I said, nowadays a lot of people don't use tablecloths. And so they still, even though they they need to have a tablecloth for their table.
Gotcha.
So it's just interesting little things like that where they tried to stay proper. But how they had an income, her dad worked for a hardware company, which I thought made sense that stayed afloat during the Depression, because rather than buying new things, people were probably fixing more things. Mm-hmm. And so they still needed those tools. So he at some point became manager at the plant there, something like that. And her mother, during the Great Depression, taught bridge to rich women.
Huh. What a creative job.
Right. That was not one that I would have thought of. Teaching a card game. So bridge, I've never played. Have you?
No, I haven't. But I do think Emily Gilmore mentions being in a bridge group.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. So my Nana's mom, my great grandma, could have taught it to Emily. What do you know?
Perfect.
So she said that she was a really good bridge player. She would play in tournaments and different things. So then her grandfather was a jeweler. He sold diamonds, which people weren't really buying diamonds during the Great Depression. So he didn't have an income after the Depression. After the Depression lifted, he sold a different kind of jewel. I think a little lesser than diamonds. He sold souvenirs at the World's Fair that was in Chicago in 33, 34. So we still have one. It's a little tin cigarette box, and it has a painting on it of World's Fair.
Oh my gosh, that is the coolest thing.
Yeah. In the episode that we watched, the girls, they were playing hopscotch, but it was in squares that they had made in the dirt, so it wasn't with chalk. But she said that she played hopscotch a lot as a kid at that time, just on the sidewalk, but with chalk, and that was a big source of entertainment for them, as well as roller skating and playing in the Chicago streets when it snowed, because they got so much snow and weren't a lot of cars anyway, and no one was driving then, so they would play out there in the streets, which I thought sounded like fun.
Perfect.
In the episode, they mentioned the WPA, which is the Works Progress Administration, and that was what FDR made to create jobs, right? Like they had some photographers I remember learning about.
Part of his alphabet soup, I think, of all the different organizations with acronyms he helped create.
Oh, yeah. And I asked my Nana if she knew anyone who was part of the WPA, and she did remember taking piano lessons from a woman who was in the WPA. It was part of the program that she was able to be a piano teacher at her school. But my Nana didn't have a piano at home to practice. Her friend had a piano, but couldn't go over there very often.
And then she had a recital, and I played the piano. It was a disaster, just a disaster.
You weren't very good?
Oh, well, I didn't have any piano to practice on. You know, I had a paper keyboard or my friend's piano.
Oh, did you know at the time that you had done poorly?
I think I did. I think I just did that once.
Oh. Well, it makes sense that she wouldn't have a piano at home, and that's not the time you're going to buy one.
No. So that was funny.
It's funny how those early memories stick with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was fun to see her just remember all these different things light up. So that was really fun to watch with her. My Nana did tell me a couple of interesting stories about her mom, who this would have happened before the Great Depression, but there are some just different societal norms that were interesting to me that came out of this. So my Nana's mother was the child of a widow, one of 4 children.
Gotcha.
So she had these 4 children on her own. The husband died 4 months before my Nana's mom was born. And so she was the last of the 4 children. So what do you do when you're a woman with 4 kids and no way to make money? Get married again. So she got married and had 4 more children with the new husband, but all 4 of them died.
Ugh, I was about to say, oh, it's like the Waltons, 8 children, and it's not.
No. So that was, I couldn't believe that, but a couple lived to be 2 or 3. And just, I guess they weren't strong to begin with. And, you know, now, I'm sure now they could have told us better what was going on. But, you know, maybe there's some gene issue or just susceptible to disease. But a rich aunt in their family offered to adopt my Nana's mother because she was one of 4 children with this widow. And she said, no, you can't adopt my child. But Nana told me that was not so abnormal for a relative to adopt a child from someone who just couldn't take care of all of them, which is so strange sounding to me. But the mother did let my Nana's mom go to Paris with this aunt and travel with her. So I think my Nana's mom was just a cutie, and she was really pretty, and the aunt thought, you know what, I'm going to show her the world. So they went to Paris. She learned French. And this rich aunt was friends with Isadora Duncan, who, if you don't know, is basically the founder of modern dance.
Whoa.
So she went to her school 4 years, learned dance, and she even performed in a play that was directed by Isadora Duncan's brother. And they just needed a young, cute girl, and so
there she is.
So yep, here she is. So she just had some real interesting opportunities. I mean, I can't imagine just being whisked away from my family for 4 years as a young teenager and going to a dance school, and very different from when the Great Depression hit. You know, this was before it would have been the 1900s, 1910s. Things were just kind of building in the U.S.
So, your great-great-grandmother let your great-grandmother go to Paris with your great-great-aunt.
Yep.
I think.
All great women. Yeah, great-great-aunt. Yep. Well done, Taylor.
I'm trying, making the connections.
And then there is a story that I've been told for years from my family that I think the wealthy aunt gave Isadora Duncan a scarf as a gift. Ooh. And that scarf is the scarf that killed her. It got stuck in her car door, and she was strangled by it. And that is how she died. I am dead serious. I've been told this since I was a little kid. My great-great-aunt helped
Kyla.
I know.
What in the world?
Isn't that
the craziest?
craziest?
She died because a scarf got stuck in the door?
Yes.
This is crazy town.
I'm going to look it up again, though.
And supposedly, so your great-great-aunt indirectly almost kind of did kill Isadora Duncan, the founder of modern dance.
Here it is, history.com. On September 4th, 1927, she would have still been alive. Dancer Isadora Duncan is strangled in Nice, France, when the enormous silk scarf she is wearing gets tangled in the rear hubcaps of her open car.
Oh my goodness. That is crazy.
Yes. So there's some little family history for you about my family.
Yeah, some skeletons in your closet killing dancers.
Modern dance must end.
It was all part of your great-great-aunt's plot. I could come up with all sorts of conspiracy theories. You better stop me.
Moving along. So there was my episode. What'd you guys watch? Well, you and Grandna.
Grana.
Grana.
G-R-A-N-N-A. Yes. So we actually watched a season 2 episode as well. We watched the very first episode, which was called The Journey, which could you be more generic? So in this episode, there are a couple different plots going on. The B plot, maybe even the C plot, is that there's a bird that shows up and with a hurt wing, and the younger children bring it to the house, and Ma says, don't bring it into the house. We already have enough animals. Keep it in the barn. So they do, and Grandpa helps the kids restore the bird's wing, and then they let the bird fly back to the sea. They think the storm blew it onto Walton Mountain. Which serves as a nice metaphor, because meanwhile, John Boy is caught in 2 different plots. So his B plot is that the school dance is coming up.
Dun,
and
dun.
Yes, it's a big deal. And his trousers, or breeches, as they keep referring to them, his breeches have... he has none acceptable for the dance, and so he wants to buy these new gray flannel trousers at Ike's store, but they are $2.35, which is a lot of money, and Ma would rather him use it on his class ring. But he decides to spring for them and gets the pants, but he's trying to get a date, too, because, oh goodness, Marcia, that's her name. He wants to take Marcia.
Marcia.
That's exactly what I thought of. So, but obviously not the same person. And she's being a little tricky. She keeps saying, well, John Boy, I haven't made up my mind whether or not I'm going with you. And it's funny that you mentioned etiquette earlier and had trouble remembering the word, because I kid you not, this happened in this episode. And... Kyla, it is totally fine that you did not remember that word. But in the context of this episode, it was a little cringeworthy, because she's saying, I haven't made up my mind. And John Boy says, well, you need to make up your mind. I insist you tell me whether or not you are going to this dance with me. And she says, well, it's my job to change my mind. It's a woman's and John Boy says, you mean a prerogative? And she's like, yeah, I read that in a book about etiquette. Oh, John Boy, you're so smart.
Oh, my word. Cringe.
Yeah, so it's not that you couldn't remember the word that's a bad thing. It's just that in this episode, they frame it as Marcia is fickle and not very smart, and that John Boy is the one who knows what's going on. It made me cringe a little inside. But it was just funny to me that we did not plan that, people. So ultimately she decides to go to the dance with him, but in the long run he cannot go because there is a neighbor. This is the woman that my grandma kept saying, I do not remember her. She is a woman who, her 55th anniversary is coming up. Her husband had died years before, but she wants to go to the sea on their anniversary where they got married. And ultimately, she enlists John Boy to take her there, and so he has to miss the dance. And
they can't just go at another time in the day?
Because it's a long journey.
Oh, yeah, I guess they don't have, like, a fast car.
Yeah, so, and she wants to drive herself, but the doctor won't let her because she has a heart condition, and she might go by herself anyway and risk her life, and she does end up dying, but she got to go to the sea and spend a nice day with John Boy, where they go out for a lobster dinner that costs $2.35 because he returns the pants so that he can go with her. They buy a lobster dinner and they dance, and he transforms into her long deceased husband as they are dancing.
Oh my.
So
that's a little strange.
But because he was so kind to her, she leaves him a $20 gold piece.
Oh my.
Which is a huge deal. And she was supposed to turn it in to, she says, President Roosevelt, but she kept it anyway because it was a wedding gift. So.
How they frame John Boy as a little too angelic. Like, does he ever do anything wrong?
Well, he did tell the lady that he was not going to take her to the beach at first. Which, because he already had plans and a date to take this girl to the dance, which I felt like was a reasonable reason.
Pretty
like,
valid.
I've already made plans, and I will let someone down if I do this with you. But apparently the moral choice here was to take her to the beach.
And for her to envision you as her dead husband. Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
So, however, it was a sweet, you got to see a little, like, this lady was really, truly happy. This was she'd been dreaming of going back to the sea all these years after her husband died and really wanted it to happen. And so I felt like maybe if they hadn't had that conflict of the dance, like maybe if John Boyd just was like, I don't want to do it, it would have been a little sweeter of like, okay, you're just giving up some time to go see her.
Yeah.
But when I was watching this with my grandma, she loves this show. This is one of her all-time favorites. She always loves how there's a lesson in it, and she really enjoyed watching it again. She hadn't seen it in a long time. I decided not to record our conversation just because she's not very tech savvy, and she's the first person who will tell you that. So I thought it would be a little complicated to try and explain what was going on with that. But she loves this show, and it was interesting to hear her perspective. She was born in 1939, so the tail end of the Great Depression, but she does have a lot of memories, early memories of that time transitioning into the war. She remembered the ration book that they had to take to the grocery store to try and get the specific amount of food that they had. And she said after they didn't need it anymore, she actually did keep the book. And they were like cloth pages that you'd flip through.
Interesting.
Yeah. And the Waltons went into World War II as well. So this is kind of a, in retrospect, funny story. But when she was a little kid, they'd have those air raid drills, the blackout drills, and everyone would have to go inside their home and be quiet. And, the sirens would go off and they'd have to close all the windows and turn off all the lights. She said you never knew if it was real or if it was just a drill. So you always had to do that. And she was super little. She was only born in 1939, and no one really explained to her what was going on. So she was terrified, and she was coming home from school one day and had to run home when the sirens went off. So that was, in retrospect, it's a little funny, because you know what's going on now, but also, so you had to be really quiet. But her mom one time, my gram, so that's my great-grandma, she and a friend who lived across the street were hollering at each other from across the street to each other, and they got in trouble because they were supposed to be really quiet. And it's funny that your Nana mentioned to the apartment that they went to. My grandma said nobody bought a house because it was way too expensive. They always rented.
And where were they living?
So she's lived in St. Louis her whole life. Okay. So she's lived in several different places. She lived in the Webster Groves area, which is actually just really close to where I work now. Okay. Which is kind of funny. So she has driven by and shown us the house she lived in for a while.
Cool.
Yeah. And she went to a one-room schoolhouse, and she went to Webster Groves High School. And she always talks about how she, as a kid, had to walk 3 miles to school in elementary school to go to a one-room schoolhouse, and then now went to Webster Groves High School, which is still around today and a really good school. So she was pretty proud of making that transition from one-room schoolhouse to a bigger school.
Mm-hmm.
In the house that she lived in, she shared a bed with her 2 sisters, especially in the winter. That was really important to keep warm, because all their heat was coming from the wood-burning stove downstairs. And she said she remembered as a kid, they had an outhouse and they did not have indoor plumbing. So she said she remembered as a kid trying really hard to not have to go to the bathroom, because it was really cold in the winter to have to go outside. And they also shared bath water. So they would have to fill up the tub, and the first person who took a bath got the best bath. So glad we still don't do that. And so another thing too, she remembered as a kid loving to go to the Christmas Eve service at church, because the kids would always get a big bag of candy.
Oh.
And there was one year they couldn't go because her dad did not feel well, and so they were so bummed that they missed out on their big bags of candy. And like you were talking about with I guess it would have been your great aunts and uncles who passed away when they were really little kids. She thinks her dad had celiac disease, which is something she has now, and my mom and my siblings, which means you need to be gluten-free, because the gluten can really block your intake of nutrients and really upset your stomach. So it's not gluten-free by choice. It's gluten-free because you have to. And she thinks that's where she got it, because her dad felt sick all the time, and they wouldn't know that. So they wouldn't know how to diagnose that.
Right.
And another story about her dad, he almost had to fight in World War II. And they even have a picture with him in his uniform. But then they passed a law that if you have 3 kids, you don't have to go. And she was the 3rd kid. So she always likes to say she kept her dad home from war.
Oh.
So.
That is nice that they had that rule, though. Because with 3 kids.
Yeah.
Especially back then, you really needed to have the dad there.
Mm-hmm. So just some of those stories are not directly related to the Depression, but the thing that she kept saying as she was telling these stories and as we watched the show together, she kept saying, you do not even know what it was like. You don't even know how good you have it. Because, I mean, even things as simple as indoor plumbing, and I kind of joke about $235 for a pair of pants, but that was a huge deal. And so I think it's my modern perspective that I can, I have a lot of privilege and a lot of, I'm really lucky to have that perspective. And so for, hearing that from my grandma, because, that seems so long ago, but my grandma, she's still here, and she remembers that. And so, yeah. It was a good perspective to have.
Well, and one thing I noticed in the Waltons show, which it was just a TV show, so they can create it however they decide to, but you see all these kids crammed around a table with the grandparents, and then 3 beds in this one room, I remember, and conditions weren't great, but they were really positive. And when my Nana talked about it, of course she was still able to live in an apartment. I think some people probably had it worse off, but she wasn't negative about it, And so what you were saying about just the perspective that we have now, we didn't live through, our generation hasn't lived through World War I, a World War II, a Great Depression. We haven't seen that kind of depravity or threat to our life, like they did. And so, we have the battles, our generation has the battles that we're fighting, but when you look at this time period, makes them seem really minimal, some of them.
Yeah. Well, and when people talk about the economic collapse of 2008, I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Compared to the Great Depression, we're doing pretty great. And I can't speak for everyone's experience post-2008. I know it has hit some people way harder than others, but even our country as a whole is doing much better than it was in the 30s.
In some aspects.
Yes, well, economically. I mean, as a whole, economically as a whole. I am not saying our country is in its best moment in history.
This podcast is non-political.
We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, leave it at that.
I hate President Bush.
What? Lorelai.
Oh, boy.
He's stupid, and his face is too tiny for his head, and I just want to toss him out.
That is the leader of our country, young lady.
Ignore her.
His face is too tiny for his head. What kind of a thing is that to say?
Okay, so when we look back on this Gilmore Girls scene now and talk about the Waltons, like I said, I knew who the Waltons were, but I have a greater appreciation for them now. I think Rory is trying to get at kind of the schmaltiness. Like, do you think Ma Walton ever got in bed with her kids and told the story of how they were born? However, I mean, thinking of like our grandmas who lived in small living spaces and my grandma who had to share a bed with her sisters, I'll bet the Waltons, you know, that's kind of what it was for them too. So, and close-knit family. And even though the Gilmores are not necessarily a close-knit family, which, I mean, compared to Emily and Lorelai, makes a nice contrast with the Waltons. It definitely has that same intergenerational stuff. So they don't live together, but the grandparents are a huge influence in the kids' lives. So that's a nice comparison between Waltons and Gilmore.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think the two of them sharing a bed together, that made Rory think of the Waltons. And it made me think about how at the end of every episode they say, "Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Ma. Good night, Pa. Good night, John Boy," and they all say good night to each other. And so this being the nighttime routine, instead of that, it's talking about labor.
That is that's one thing too my grandma pointed out when that scene came on in the episode we watched. It was, they're gonna turn off all the lights and they're all gonna say goodnight to each other in the Dragonfly Inn.
How precious.
Yes.
Everybody quiet down now and get some sleep.
Night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Night, Ben.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children.
Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good night,
Good night, Jim Bob. Go back to sleep.
Not only are we going to find 20 eggs within the hour, but we're going on to find 25, and then 30, and then 35, and then 40, and then 45, and then 50, until we find all 59 and take back the square. Yeah!
Woo! We found 2 more eggs. We are ready for you, Kirk. Way to go, Kirk, for pepping us up.
Thank you.
We found 2 more eggs to a year in the life. 2 little connections in this very episode, Rory's 2 birthday parties. Whew! So, the very first one is in the very first scene of this episode at Friday night dinner, and Richard and Emily are talking about their will, and here is a clip of them talking about it.
So, Rory, your grandfather and I thought it might be nice after dinner for you to go around the house and pick out what you'd like us to leave you in our will.
Take a look at that desk at my office. It's a really fine Georgian piece.
Why don't I ever bring a tape recorder to these dinners?
Oh, well, anything you want to leave me is fine.
Nonsense. You should have what you like. So just look around, and when you see something you like, stick a post-it on it.
Okay, you two have officially hit a new level of weird that even I marvel at.
But I've never had pudding from a crystal bowl before.
You like the bowl? Put a post-it on it when you're done.
Then, as I was watching it, it made me think of this scene in the spring episode of A Year in the Life.
You ever been in here?
Once. It's, woody.
You can still smell Richard's cigars. I like that smell.
It's a good smell.
Richard left you a sum of money in his will. You didn't know that?
No.
The money is in a trust account to be used for a specific purpose and for that purpose only.
Which is?
To expand and franchise Luke's Diner.
What?
So, the connection I realized between these 2 episodes is, 1, there was a talk of Richard's will in the first season, and it gets referenced in The Year in the Life. And there's even kind of a funny connection because Richard tells Rory, you should come check out my desk because you might like it, and maybe put a post-it on it. Yeah, see if it doesn't get lost over the years. And then when Luke and Emily are talking, it's in Richard's office, and she comments on the smell of Richard's cigars in there too. So his office is a connection But here's my question. How come we never talk about what Richard left Lorelai and Rory?
Yeah, that is true.
Did Rory get the pudding dish?
Well, but if Emily's still using it...
That's true.
But
that is true.
Did he not leave them... Like, because I know, like, when my granddad died, I don't think he didn't leave anything specific for anyone. It was just all for my Nana. So maybe it's all of their Post-its on his items are still waiting to be given.
Gotcha. But if he left money for Luke...
Oh, right.
Who's not even his blood relative...
Then why wouldn't he have left even, like, a book for Rory?
Yeah. And why didn't he leave that money for Lorelai to franchise the inn like she ends up doing?
Because Amy Sherman Palladino wanted that to be a twist.
Yeah. Or maybe Rory's already spent it on flights to London by this time.
Yeah, that could be.
Yeah.
So weird.
So that was just a nice little tie-in. And fun fact, not my grandma, but my other grandma. I do remember her saying, here, put Post-it notes on things you want us to leave you when we were kids.
Oh.
And I don't know what ever became of that conversation, but I do remember that happening.
Did you put Post-its on things?
I think so. Thing is, I can't remember what they were now. And now this grandma has passed away, but my grandpa is around. So I don't know if he remembers what items these were, because I don't. So
interesting.
Anyway, maybe we'll find out. One day we'll find a Post-it on something. Oh, this is for you.
Thanks.
And then, Kyla, this is the Easter egg that got me really excited.
Okay.
I was watching this episode, and I had a moment, and I went, oh my gosh, this is a three-peat in the series. So here is this moment in episode 106.
She's not here yet.
All right. Well, you'll have to entertain me until she arrives. Okay, Burger Boy, dance.
Will you marry me?
What?
Just looking for something to shut you up.
Okay, Kyla, this gets repeated. Here it is in season 5, in the beginning of season 6.
She is not quitting school. This was her dream. I am not going to let this happen. What?
Luke, will you marry me?
What?
Okay, and here it is again in the fall episode of A Year in the Life.
I was getting coffee. I should have known. It would have something to do with coffee. Everything in my life has something to do with coffee. I believe in a former life I was coffee, but the place was closed and I had to wait, and I walked around the back and there was this hill, and I don't know why, but I walked up the hill and there was this vista, and suddenly something became completely clear to me. Luke.
Stop! I know what you're doing.
You do?
You're getting ready to leave me. And I have to tell you, it's a big mistake.
Wait, Luke.
I see the signs. I've seen them coming for months.
What signs?
Your bolting signs, the distance, the therapy, then suddenly, you're going to go do wild. Really, you're going to go hiking alone with nothing else involved, no music festival or Hello Kitty booth, just you and nature.
I admit, it sounded weird.
I don't care what anybody says. Needing space is never a good thing, ever. I needed space before. I needed space with Nicole, and we got divorced. I mean, that's what needing space means. It means I need space and the number of a good attorney.
Luke,
We have been through too much here, you and me, okay? I mean, I know things aren't perfect, and I know there's been some issues. All right, and you've kept things from me, and I've kept things from you. You wanted me to sleep with all those women.
Okay, we've got to clarify how this surrogate thing works.
I am not unhappy, okay? I am not unsatisfied. You think I'm unhappy and unsatisfied, and I can't convince you that I am not. I mean, this right here is all I will ever need. I never thought in my wildest dreams that it would happen, that you and me, that we would happen, but we did. Listen, I know I'm not the easiest guy in the world to build a life with, to share a house with, but there is no one who will be more here for you than me. I will never leave. I will never think about leaving. I will do whatever it takes to fix what's wrong. I'll go to that nutty therapist of yours. I'll open up a franchise if that's who you want me to be. I'll run the kitchen at your inn. I'll I'll give you back the entire closet. I only took that half because you insisted I do it. I just figured, you would take it back eventually anyhow.
I already started. I didn't know if you noticed.
Starting to look a little pink.
There were sparkles.
Oh, it's yours. Take it.
I don't want it.
Please, take it.
I don't need it.
Yes, you do. You need it. You need the space, and I need you. God damn it, Lorelai. We have been through so much. I mean, we've watched each other go from person to person. I mean, there was Rachel and Max and Christopher. I had to watch you marry that guy, and it was awful. But we made it here. We made it through all of that. I mean, you can't leave. You just can't leave.
Luke. I think we should get married.
What?
Oh, I didn't catch that ever.
I didn't the first time either until I watched this one. So it just made my... those are two great eggs, I think, especially that second one.
But I do love how the only time he ever asked Lorelai to marry him is as a joke.
Yes. Unless there's another time that I've
twice.
forgotten, but I'm pretty sure that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So, there you go.
Aww.
Make your heart melt. That is a nice three-peat, I think, throughout the series.
I think so, too.
So, here you go, Kirk. We found 2 more eggs for you.
Thank you. Thank you. I love you. I love you.
So, that's our show. Thank you for helping us answer the questions. So, it's a show today, because we did. And the show was the Waltons. And if you are a big Waltons fan, or if you have thoughts on the Waltons, feel free to let us know. You can reach out to us on Twitter at SoIt'sAShow, or you can shoot us an email at soitsashow@gmail.com.
And if your grandma or grandpa lived through the Great Depression, you should totally ask them about it, because they'll tell you awesome stories, and then you should share those with us, because we'd love to hear it.
Yes. You can find me on Twitter as well at tblake24.
And I'm on Twitter at Kyla Katnedu, which is KYLACARNEIRO. I should find a way to explain the spelling of that without having to spell it all out. Kayla minus the first A, car, and then Nero. I don't know. One day.
Because that's definitely less complicated than spelling it.
And more helpful. No. So reach out to us. Love to hear your thoughts on this episode and any references that you've caught in episodes that you think need to be explained. We would love to dive into those.
For sure. Because believe me, we narrow down the list every episode. There are more than we can do. Always open to learning about what you want to learn about, because we probably need to learn about them too.
Yep, it's true.
So in our next episode, we're going to be getting our fashionista on. We are going to be talking about someone that gets a quick reference. Maybe we'll tease it. Maybe we won't tell you who it is. Keep you in suspense. But, we might be talking a little fashion in the next episode.
Fashion.
Woo! Get ready.
And here's the clip. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Come on. Dab on some lip gloss, clear but fruity, maybe a little mascara, wear your hair down and your attitude high.
You're like a crazy Elsa Clench.
Oh, thank you. Come on now, hustle. We got a man coming over.
And it's so hard to believe that exactly this time many moons ago, I was lying in exactly the same position.
Oh boy, here we go.
Only I had a huge fat stomach and big fat ankles, and I was swearing like a sailor.
On leave.
On leave, right. And there I was.
In labor.
And while some have called it the most meaningful experience of your life, to me it was something more akin to doing the splits on a crate of dynamite.
I wonder if the Waltons ever did this.
And I was screaming and swearing and being surrounded as I was by 100 prominent doctors. I just assumed there was an actual use for the cup of ice chips they gave me.
There wasn't.
But pelting the nurses sure was fun.
I love you, Mom.
Shh, I'm getting to the good part where he sees your head. So there I was.